Number 5. The Barney and Betty Hill Incident. The case of Barney and Betty Hill has puzzled UFO enthusiasts for generations and is considered one of the most well-documented, well-discussed UFO abduction stories, and also President Obama's favorite. He's making a documentary on it. In 1961, a young couple, Betty and Barney Hill, were driving home through New Hampshire when they saw a bright light flying through the sky. 2 hours later, they found themselves back in their driveway without knowing what had happened, confused, shocked, and afraid. The couple claimed that they traveled to a star system 39 light years from Earth, Zeta Reticuli. Before this point, there weren't really many widespread stories of abductions in the United States, so this story caught on wildly. As they were driving home, the couple noticed something bright in the sky. Feeling dizzy and drowsy, the two of them found themselves asleep and waking up in their driveway, completely lost as to how they got there. When they'd awoken, Betty was convinced that they'd experienced a close encounter and went to Air Force to report their sightings. They would spend the next 2 years explaining their case to various government officials and medical professionals. Mr. Barney Hill would go on to recount to a psychiatrist that he was having nightmarish, repetitive dreams. He would recall these creatures with slanted eyes and gray skins that took them on board and experimented on them by taking samples of their flesh and hair. The two underwent hypnosis therapy from a licensed psychologist in a hopes to uncover what they could have experienced and repressed. And shockingly, Betty Hill was able to draw a map of the stars seemingly from memory, a planet orbiting Zeta Reticuli. The map was nearly spot on, a near perfect recreation of the stars surrounding the actual solar system. This event would end up leading to the Air Force launching Project Blue Book, the clandestine program to research UFO and abduction stories and investigate just what's out there. And if you're looking for more UFO content, even stuff on Project Blue Book, we've got all of that and then some. Come take a look through at all the declassified files, stories of abductions, sightings, close encounters, and way more. So stay subscribed, stay scared, but more importantly, stay watching this video. I worked hard on it. We got lots more abduction stories coming up for you in just a second. Number 4. Terrell Copeland. For some, too many abduction stories come from a disreputable source, you know? Well, our next story comes from a former United States Marine, Terrell Copeland, a man who'd seen the brink and back and had never been shook like this before in his life. Pop those ears open and take a listen. Copeland reported this in 2007. He was living in his Virginia apartment when he saw an orb of white light across the street and hovering in the air, some 300 meters above the ground and changing colors rapidly. Now, Terrell had the same reaction most people like you and I might have seeing a glowing, colorful disco ball in the sky, and he thought, well, that's kind of weird, something's wrong. So he recorded it, posted footage online, and claims this is where his life took a dark turn. He was taking a nap in his apartment, and he said it sounded as if someone was breaking in. He called out into the darkness, asking who was invading his space, and he saw the doorknob move and heard scratching at his door. He grabbed a firearm that he kept in his apartment and went to go ready it, but found himself completely frozen, unable to move no matter how bad he wanted to. He claims he heard a voice that spoke to him, internally, as if it was his own thoughts, saying, "You don't need to do that. We won't harm you." I'm pretty sure if I heard that from inside my head, I would leap out my window just to be safe and take my chances somersaulting down the road because I'm probably safer there. Now, doctors thought this incident was sleep paralysis, a condition in which one can experience vivid auditory and visual hallucinations during a period of insomnia and even freeze up. But Copeland would complain of hours missing that he couldn't remember. He said there was a span of about 4 hours over the course of 2 nights that he couldn't remember a single second of. So Copeland began to keep notes and sketches of his memories as he started to have these blocked memories resurfacing. He claimed that he saw a person with an elongated skull and pitch black eyes, and said he had a vivid memory of standing on a balcony waving at a cylinder-shaped ship. On a positive note for all of this, Copeland says that he doesn't believe this incident has haunted him, but feels that it's made him a better person and asking more questions, and it's definitely given him a story to tell at parties. Number 3. Frederick Valentin. Frederick Valentin was an Australian pilot. He was well trained, and he was an avid enthusiast of UFOs and extraterrestrials. Lucky for him, he might have seen one. Sadly for him, it was the last time anyone saw him. It was 1978, and Frederick disappeared over his 125 nautical mile training flight over the Australian mainland. While at 4,500 feet in the air, Valentin reported that there was an unidentifiable craft following behind him. Melbourne Flight Services insisted that there wasn't any other aircraft in the space with him, but Frederick replied back, "No, there's something on my tail." He described it as glowing with 4 repeating bright lights and rushing past him. Valentin said it was shiny, metallic, and chrome, and he was on radio with air control for 5 minutes before he started mysteriously experiencing engine trouble. The flight controller asked him again what was following him. Valentin responded, "It's hovering and it is not an aircraft." And this was the last thing anyone ever heard from Frederick Valentin. Authorities were completely unable to recover his craft, and after an intense search, threw their shoulders up at a loss. A local farmer alleged that he had seen a strange flying object in the sky the same day as Valentin's disappearance. The farmer went on to explain that he claims he saw the plane attached to this UFO. He told officials that he was scared to tell anyone about what he had seen for fear he would be the town laughingstock if he was a farmer raving about a UFO. Tragically, in the end, we're no closer to understanding what happened to Frederick now than we were all those years ago in 1978. Did Frederick get his wish? Did he get to see an alien up close? Did they take him back to the stars? Or who knows? And we may never know. I don't know. Number 2. Travis Walton. Alien abduction stories can be a little much sometimes. I'm sure you can agree. Even for those with very open minds, you know, they all seem kind of the same, and usually you can poke holes through them and find all the little weird details that don't add up. Well, take a listen to this one. Travis Walton's story is one of the most famous abduction examples on record. You might be familiar with it before if you study UFO stuff a lot. I've covered it a few times on this channel before because I think it is one of the most fascinating abduction stories. So let's hear it. In 1975, Travis Walton was working as a logger on an otherwise unremarkable day. And he was with 6 other loggers driving around in the forest when they saw something incredibly bright shining at them through the treetops. One of the men claimed that it looked like a flattened saucer. Walton stepped out of the truck to investigate and was struck by some invisible force that had knocked him backward. This startled the rest of the crew, who drove off in a flurry. And it's a great way to find out who your real friends are. Your real friends are not the guys who will leave you in the woods where you're about to get abducted. I wouldn't do that to you. When the crew returned, Walton had vanished. Travis awoke and had thought that he'd been taken to a hospital because suddenly he found himself in a blindingly bright, sterile room and could hear people moving around him. But it wasn't until he got a good look at his doctors that he realized something was very wrong. 3 feet tall, brown quarter-sized pupils, and marshmallow-like skin. Walton freaked out, I think as most of us probably would do, and was restrained by his captors. He fought them off, but was greeted by a tall creature that he said resembled human, but was masked by an intimidating helmet, kind of a Darth Vader deal. This masked creature took Walton and escorted him back into the operating room, put a translucent mask over his face, while Walton drifted out of consciousness over and over again, unsure if anything that was happening was real. The next thing he remembers is walking alongside a highway as if nothing had ever happened. He eventually found his way to a phone and called for his brother-in-law, who panickedly asked what had happened. It turned out that Walton had been gone for 5 days. He was untraceable. Search parties had formed looking for him, sent dogs and choppers, tracked him from the woods, but no one could find any sign of him, as if he'd blinked right out of existence, and then blinked right back. Travis swore what happened to him was absolutely real, an abduction, and he's maintained this ever since that fateful week in 1975. Now, if you really think this story is fascinating, and you wish you could have seen some footage of what Travis described, unfortunately he didn't bring his camcorder. You can, however, watch a 90s movie directly based off the case called Fire in the Sky. It's on Amazon Prime or something, I'm sure. And finally, number 1, the Berkshire Incident. Now here's the thing with most UFO sightings. They're isolated scenarios, you know? One sleep-deprived night watchman sees something weird out the corner of his eye. Somebody up way too late sees something up in the sky. It's hard to believe just one person's story. That's why it's significantly harder to write off the experience of Berkshire County, where half the town reported seeing the same UFO. Uncanny and unprecedented. 250 residents and more all reported seeing the same UFOs flying across the night sky. So it was 1969. Multiple residents across town spotted blinding lights above Sheffield in the southern Berkshires. Witnesses reported that the lights they saw were beaming from saucers, bright lights onto the horizon. Some residents said that they felt that time was slowing down as they watched the object, claiming that it left them frozen and stunned, wondering just what it was they were looking at. One witness comes from a young student, one Thomas Reed, who said that he saw one of the floating entities, a glowing orb, dashing outside the forest. He claims he heard an eruption of crickets and frogs and a loud deafening sound, and then inexplicably 2 hours had passed without anyone understanding why or how. His mother and grandmother had switched car seats as well. Now, as an adult, Thomas Reed claims that over time his family has corroborated what had happened to them. He speaks of being in this immensely large, almost infinitely spanning metal hangar with hallways and hallways stretching out forever. Thomas Reed took a polygraph test telling this story and was found to be 99.1% 100% truthful. Multiple people across Berkshire that day reported similar stories. Balls of light, flying saucers, losses of time, finding themselves somewhere they couldn't explain. The residents of Berkshire may never get to the bottom of what happened there, but I know the truth is out there. And I know Top 5 Scary is gonna find it, I'm pretty sure.
Number 5. Leland Melvin. American engineer and now retired NASA astronaut Leland Melvin has spent hundreds of hours in space. Literally hundreds. Leland holds 4 honorary doctorates for his service in education, the sciences, and philanthropy. Doctorates. I'm just saying that before the comments start rolling in saying he's just another wacko. He's crazy. They're not wackos, people. Any of them. They've been screened so many times by so many people with so many tests, they have to be damn well near perfect before going up on or in NASA's budget. Before his career with NASA, Leland was actually All-American for football. Detroit Lions, Toronto Argos. Guy made the NFL and then said, you know what? I think I'm gonna be an astronaut. Like, give this guy a Netflix movie, would ya? He was selected by NASA in 1998 after getting injured with a football career. Guy goes from the turf to working at NASA Langley Center. This guy's put in time, both down here and up there. Mission after mission with NASA. He's got quite the practice at the whole floating around thing. When Leland was pressed about otherworldly visitors and his ideas about the cosmos, he said this when he was working up in orbit. He had seen something translucent, curved and organic looking when he was working with fellow astronaut Randy Bresnik. The pair of them, again, called down to NASA to ask what it could be. NASA's official response was probably ice. Yeah, nice and specific there, Houston. Thank you for that. When has NASA ever said probably? Melvin dismissed this and figured it was NASA's explanation to just cover it up. Like, who's more qualified here? That's all I'm asking. When the most qualified people are like, yeah, I can't tell if that's frozen water or a full-on mothership, Houston. Either they shouldn't be up there at all, or we need some more Windex on those windows there, NASA. Huh? Number 4. Ivan Wagner. As always, if you dig what we do here at Top 5 Scary, make sure you hit that like button or comment down below. It really helps the channel out. Have you ever seen a UFO out there? Yeah, you. Have you seen one? Comment down below with some details about your experiences. I know I have. Twice now. Hence the obsession with all this stuff. Those Reddit rabbit holes, boy oh boy. Speaking of falling into a wormhole of conspiracy and who said what, astronaut Ivan Wagner, or I should say cosmonaut Ivan Wagner, since he's Russian by birth, and although he's bunking up with some roomies up there in the ISS, he was on the ISS as a first timer just back in 2020. Does NASA initiate rookies up there? Like pull pranks on the newbies? Like no gravity, just unbuckle you while you sleep, flow you out, you know? He and fellow Russian Anatoly Ivanishin were working up there alongside Chris Cassidy, the American commander of said expedition. When Wagner was orbiting the Earth, he might have captured some footage of UFOs, better known as UAPs, unidentified aerial phenomena. It's the jargon nowadays. The aurora lights behind Earth's beautiful curves was being recorded from the ISS when he saw a string of really weird lights moving in a really weird way. He labeled the video Space Guests. Wagner tweeted the vid, which apparently shows the aurora australis near Antarctica, and then all of a sudden this blob of organized lights just cruises on over the globe. Looks like a blob of like glitter just trucking across space. Like, what is that? Of course NASA didn't follow up. Like, what are they gonna say? Oh yeah, those are stars that move and blink, I think. I mean, no? Space junk. Yeah, space debris and swamps and things. Also, what a lame excuse. Space junk? Okay, so you're saying there's lots of litter up there, that's what you're saying? That's what just zipped over my house silently, defying gravity and lasered up my cow? Yeah, I don't think so, NASA. Number 3. Chris Hadfield. Retired Canadian astronaut, engineer, fighter pilot, and musician. Ladies and gentlemen, Chris Hadfield flew 2 missions and also served as commander on the International Space Station. Before his career as an astronaut, he served in the Canadian Armed Forces for 25 years as an air commander fighter pilot. So he has the credentials to say the least. In 1992, Hadfield was accepted into the Canadian astronaut program. He first flew in space in 1995, and since then, he says he's seen tons of stuff up there just zipping around that even a man with all those credentials says he can't explain. Quote, I've seen countless things in the sky, but he has a pretty cool take on it. He doesn't keep it on the DL, he doesn't boast, and he doesn't panic. Seems like Chris has the mentality like, quote, to see something in the sky that you don't understand and then to immediately conclude it's intelligent life from another solar system is the height of foolishness and lack of logic. However, Chris seems to have a little dirt on Mars that maybe we all don't. He said, I think the fundamental question is that Mars was a lot like Earth 4 billion years ago when life first formed. So if it happened here, Did it happen there? It would be evident somewhere in the geologic records. All we need is one fossil for proof. He thinks there could be potentially alien life in the clouds of Venus or on the distant moons of one of our gas giants. Researchers have suggested that there could be microbial life in the clouds of Venus because of the presence of ammonia, which on Earth is a key indicator of aquatic life. Aquatic life, eh? Atlanteans? Hadfield on the UAP phenomenon, quote, "We have 7 people living up there. We've been sending people to space since I was born. I spent half a year off planet looking everywhere. It makes no sense at all that intelligent life somewhere from not our solar system could cross interstellar space and just sneak around and only be caught on some strange video by fighter pilots. It just doesn't pass any basic sniff test or logic. It's fun, it's exciting, but if you use reason, the whole argument falls apart." End quote. Okay, Chris Hadfield, keep your secrets from now, you polite Canadian you. Wait till people start looking into Paul Hellyer, another very polite Canadian with some secrets of his own. Until then, you keep distracting us up there with that guitar, Chris. I see you, Jake Sully. Number 2, Michael Collins. NASA veteran and the very first driver up there, Mr. Michael Collins himself served as command module pilot on the historic Apollo 11 mission in 1969. When Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin walked on the moon for the very first time, saying those very first famous lines we all know so well, Collins was back parking that thing up there. Mr. Collins stayed up there by himself in lunar orbit waiting for the safe return of his crewmates. I can't even stay in a basement with the lights off by myself. Imagine being up there just drifting in the currents of matter, like being in the middle of the ocean. Yeah, no way, dude. The astronaut retired from NASA in 1970 and spent his free time answering questions on Twitter. Apparently, he has gotten some really interesting buzz. Mr. Collins invited the interweb to chat, saying, quote, "Are we alone? Hashtag Ask Michael Collins." And boy oh boy, did he get some responses. Everything from wackos who like aliens to very, very high-ranked generals and pilots who are apparently also wackos who like aliens for talking about this. Collins, quote, "I used to think that NASA sent me to the wrong place, to the moon, because I think Mars is a much more interesting place," end quote. Collins has talked about it in the past about the possibility of alien life existing beyond Earth and doesn't shy away from discussing the topic in full. In 1999, for instance, he even argued on the topic of life developing in other parts of this infinite cosmos. So maybe it has then. He wrote in his book saying, quote, "I am alone now. Truly alone, and absolutely isolated from any known life. Although I may feel like I'm the same person, I also feel that I am different from other people. I have been places and done things you simply would not believe." Collins circled the moon once every 2 hours. What's scarier, walking on an unknown rock that apparently no one's ever visited, or flying all the way around it by yourself in the pitch black with no communications? Collins achieved the rank of Major General. He left NASA in 1970 to join the State Department and later became director of the Smithsonian National Air and Space Museum in Washington. One of the most key players in this whole thing. Michael Collins sadly passed in 2021. Number 1, Buzz Aldrin. Of course, the poster child for the whole phenomenon itself, Mr. Edwin Eugene Aldrin Jr. American astronaut, engineer, fighter pilot with a doctorate of science and astronautics. This guy is overqualified, okay? 3 spacewalks in 1966, Gemini 12 mission in 1969, Apollo 11 mission. He and mission commander Neil Armstrong were the first 2 people to land on the moon. Quote, "There was something out there, close enough to be observed. What could it be?" According to Aldrin, on Apollo 11 to the moon, quote, "I observed a light out the window that appeared to be moving alongside us. What could that have been other than a spacecraft from another country or another world? It was either the rocket that had separated from us or the 4 panels that moved away when we extracted the lander, right?" After he returned from his missions, he was convinced he saw aliens while he was out there. Credentials aside, he took a lie detector test, people, which he passed with flying colors. In an interview with C-SPAN Buzz, he talked about the future potential of Earth's moon for humanity. He added a little extra info that might have gained the spark to go back, regarding a certain monolith on a moon. Quote, "Visit the moon Phobos of Mars. There's a monolith there, a very unusual structure on this little potato object that goes around Mars once in every 7 hours. When people find out about that, they're gonna say, who put that there? And you bet, Buzz, I'll be the first one to ask that." Number 5, Space Camp. Starting this list off, we arrive at the Apollo 8 mission. Well, 7 other missions before it, but it was a little rocky back then, you know? The early days. But Apollo 8 was the first fully crewed spacecraft to leave low Earth orbit and the first human spaceflight to reach the moon. Frank Borman, Jim Lovell, and Bill Anders, aka the crew. Orbited the moon 10 times without landing. December 21st, 1968. The Apollo 8 astronauts returned to Earth on December 27th, 1968. Now, here's the scary part. Apparently, while they were up there, they claimed to have seen some pretty strange stuff. Some weird lights, glowing moving balls, and apparently bonfires all over the moon. What? Yeah, apparently the men said it looked like smoke and small bonfires when visiting the far side of the moon. When the capsule passed behind the moon for 45 minutes, the crew claimed to have seen multiple lights coming from the surface. And thankfully, NASA even transcribed what they heard. Borman says, bonfires. Anders says campfires. All in all, we have astronauts puzzled at what they're seeing. 7 months later, Apollo 11 is performing a mission orbiting the moon and captures apparently a bunch of things that are out of the ordinary. Buzz and Collins both claim to have seen things like lava flowing, aliens parked on craters, to even small bonfires and flickers on the surface. Of course, there's no oxygen on the moon, so what could have caused the fire and the smoke? Number 4, air buds. As always, dudes, if you dig what we do here on Top 5 Scary, hit that thumbs up button or leave a comment down below. It really helps us out. What's the biggest NASA secret you know of? Let me know down below. I'll check it out. When we think about astronauts that have spent their fair share up in space, we can't forget the experiments in the early stages of both the Soviets and the American space programs. It truly was a race, pushing the limits faster and faster, bigger and bolder kind of stuff, and with that omelet comes a couple broken eggs. We often forget that NASA has sent its fair share of animals up there as well, and of course, unfortunately, not many of them have returned back to us. Yeah, very sad. Science is one of those things where its benefits are tremendous, but the hypothesis parts sometimes are a little dark and grim. We remember Laika, the space dog, and her 103-minute cosmic journey aboard Sputnik 2, but let's not forget the infamous Able and Baker. This was the American version of Laika, only a year later too. 1959, the United States launched one female rhesus monkey named Able and one female squirrel monkey named Baker into space. This mission lasted only 15 minutes and they both safely returned back home. Their predecessors, not so lucky. See, a couple of animals have yet to return from their space mission. Mice, geckos, dogs. It was a different time. To announce their successful flight, NASA unveiled Able and Baker to journalists in the same room where just a month prior they had introduced the Mercury 7 crew as the country's first human astronauts. Big jumps, right? Sadly, after the training and missions, both animals passed. But you can visit them at the Smithsonian National Air and Space Museum where they're both on display. A little dark and grim, but we pay homage. Number 3, Valkyrie. NASA has been experimenting with a little bit more tech in the last 20 years. A little bit more robotics instead of fitting humans into a capsule. Seems like this next project has been in the works for some years, but under silent lock and key until recent years. Valkyrie is the name of the NASA's new semi-secretive AI project. Taken from Norse mythology, Valkyrie is designed to be a robust, rugged, and entirely electric humanoid robot capable of operating in degraded or damaged human-engineered environments. The NASA R5, aka Valkyrie, is the size of a full human adult with a 7-digit price tag, putting it a little bit more expensive than the very terrestrial Tesla bot. This robot was originally built for the 2013 DARPA Robotics Challenge. The 6-foot, 300-pound piece of machinery represents the future of space exploration. It's the first step towards a goal of human colonization on Mars and other planets in our solar system. Dude, this is nuts! High hopes for the robot, however currently tethered to the ceiling of a warehouse in Lowell, Massachusetts. Oh. The Lowell model is one of 4 units produced by NASA. The space agency held on to one robot for its own purposes and awarded 2 to the research of Northwestern and MIT, while the 4th lives in Scotland's University of Edinburgh. The 4 models are being tinkered and tailored on as we speak. Long story short, we've reached a peak in space travel where maybe living things don't have to make it or break it anymore. To reduce hazards and prevent any more life being lost or altered for science, the Valkyrie is an option for NASA to search very hazardous environments while keeping a pretty safe distance while doing so. Number 2, ice cold. We all know about Jupiter's moon Europa. I was like 18 when I found out about all the planets' moons in our solar system. Yeah, did you know that Jupiter has 79 moons? Like 79. Yeah, we have 1. Like, we know nothing, Jon Snow. Well, maybe we know something, because apparently we found traces of water on a couple different rocks now. Europa, the 6th largest moon in our solar system. It was discovered in 1610, and ever since then, we've kind of wondered what's on it. In 1979, the 2 Voyager spacecrafts passed through the Jovian system, providing the first hints that Europa may contain liquid water. The ground-based telescopes on Earth, along with the Galileo spacecraft and telescopes, have increased scientists' confidence for a European ocean. Yeah, cue NASA's Sesame program. Scientific exploration ventilation subsurface access mechanism for Europa. Sesame will not drill, however, but actually thaw its way under the icy ocean, and from there will operate small probes to conduct an array of research on biology, sediment, gases, and of course what we're all hoping for, humanoid mermaid-looking aliens. However, the part that really has NASA's attention is all of the tectonic activity beneath said icy shelf, meaning that somewhere in the middle, there's warm water flowing under with currents. Yeah, creepy. In 2011, NASA awarded Stone Aerospace $4 million to fund Phase 2 of Project Sesame. Phase 2 of the project consisted of testing the cryobot in Alaska in 2015. Phase 3 of the project will use a swarm of tiny robots the size of cell phones to whisk through the water beneath the thick icy shelf of Jupiter's moon looking for evidence of alien life. The tiny robots would be released underwater, swimming far from their mothership to explore a new world. Basically, the cryobot melts its way through the subglacial lake, collects samples, resurfaces, and comes back home. Yeah, seems like an alien movie plot just ready for scripting, huh? And number 1, Artemis I. So we haven't been back to the moon since 1972, but why? Well folks, we're going back. And soon, like 2 weeks soon. Yeah, I didn't know either, as I'm a millennial who doesn't watch the news on TV. We're going back to the moon, people, but not the Apollo program anymore. No, we've changed the name to another Greek name. They're twin, Artemis. Apparently, Artemis I will be the first in a series of increasingly complex missions to build a long-term human presence on the moon for decades to come. Oh yeah, we're staying, like building forts and stuff. The primary goals for Artemis I are to demonstrate Orion systems in a spaceflight environment and to ensure a safe re-entry, descent, splashdown, and recovery. Basically like the full shebang. Yeah, not taking any more risks, huh NASA? Safety first kind of deal, I like it. Not a long mission too. September 27th they're supposed to launch, and splash back down here in November, like 38 days long. Nice little quick one. And then reevaluate and select the people. Yeah, dude, this is sick. I'm down with Phase 2 space stuff, you know? Like, let's get that robot up there. Number 5, the Great Attractor. The Great Attractor is a gravitational anomaly in space and the apparent central gravitational point of the Laniakea supercluster. The observed anomaly suggests a localized concentration of mass, millions of times more massive than the Milky Way. That's a lot of M's. It is inconveniently blurred by our own Milky Way galaxy view, lying just behind the zone of avoidance. Basically, we know it's there, but we can't really see it. Yet. In visible light wavelengths, the Great Attractor is difficult to observe. In fact, it will not be visible for another 100 million years until Earth will be on the other side of the Milky Way galaxy, allowing us to see past the galactic plane of matter. It's terrifying. It's not a black hole, but acts like one. Okay. With its discovery in the late 70s, the Milky Way actually moves through space after a series of velocity tests. Astrophysicists found that the Milky Way was moving towards the constellation of Centaurus at about 600 kilometers per second. Yeah. The discovery of cosmic microwave background dipoles were used to reflect the motion towards the Great Attractor, allowing us to initialize there is something really there. When first discovered, we had no way to see through the zone of avoidance, but while that region blocks much of the visible light beyond, the gas and dust anomalies block infrared and X-ray light as much as they can. As X-ray astronomy became more powerful, we could start to see objects around that part of the sky. And what they found was a large supercluster of galaxies in the area of the Great Attractor known as the Norma Cluster, a mass of about 1,000 trillions of our suns. That's thousands of galaxies in the same place. When we look at an even larger region of galaxies, we find that the local galaxies in the Great Attractor are moving towards something even larger, known as the Shapley Supercluster. It contains more than 8,000 galaxies and has a mass of more than 10 million billion suns. That sounds made up. The Shapley Supercluster is in fact the most massive galaxy cluster within 1 billion light years of us, and we and every galaxy in our corner of the universe are moving slowly towards it. Dude, I gotta sleep tonight, really? Number 4, black holes. Black holes, yeah, these are significantly less scary all of a sudden. Or are they? These regions in space where gravity is so strong that nothing can escape has been quite the hot topic these days. Half of the 2020 Nobel Prize in Physics was awarded to Roger Penrose for his mathematical work showing that black holes are an inescapable consequence of Einstein's theory of gravity. And of course, Andrea Ghez and Reinhard Genzel shared the other half for proving that a massive black hole sits in the center of our galaxy. Alright, I was almost not anxious for a second there. Black holes are terrifying for a couple reasons. If you fell into a black hole left over when a star died, you would be spaghetti. Yeah, Also, black holes are places where the laws of physics no longer exist. Reading this just reminds me we still know nothing, and we have iPhones. The first black hole confirmed was Cygnus X1, the brightest X-ray source in the Cygnus constellation. Since then, about 50 other black holes have been discovered in the systems. There are apparently 10 million that are expected to be scattered throughout the Milky Way galaxy alone. Last year, astronomers published the first ever picture of a black hole and its event horizon. A 7 billion solar mass Leviathan lays still in the M87 galaxy. It's over 1,000 times bigger than the black hole in our galaxy. These black holes are dark most of the time, but when their gravity pulls in nearby stars and gas, they pump out huge amounts of radiation. If you get too close to one of them, the enormous gravity will suck you in and time will seem to have stopped completely for you. Just getting spaghettied for eternity. Yeah, that's horrifying. Number 3, the cosmic microwave background. The CMB, or famously known as simply the cold spot, is a region of the sky seen in microwaves that has been found to be unusually large and cold relative to the expected properties of the cosmic background radiation. The cold spot is approximately much colder than the average CMB temperature, and many theoretical explanations exist, including a so-called supervoid or great void that may exist outside of our galaxy. Such a void would be one of the largest structures in the observable universe. This would be an extremely large region of the universe containing a density of matter much smaller than the average density in space. A 2015 study shows a supervoid that has a radius of 1.8 billion light years across and is 3 billion light years away from our galaxy in the direction of the cold spot is likely associated with it. Although large voids are already known in the universe, a void would have to be exceptionally vast to explain being so cold. So it's dark, it's cold, and it's huge, and we have no idea what it is. Theories suggest it could be another universe beyond our own, caused by quantum entanglement. The problem with these theories is by standard cosmology, such a giant cosmic hole shouldn't exist. If the cold spot is in fact another universe merging with ours, then this provides the first evidence for a parallel universe. Could this be the long-lost dark energy astrophysicists talk about? Who knows, dude? Number 2, altered carbon. Preliminary results from NASA's twins study reveal that 7% of astronaut Scott Kelly's genetic expression, DNA, and genes did not return to baseline after his return to home to Earth 2 years ago. I'm sorry, what? The study looks at what happened to astronaut Kelly before, during, and after he spent exactly 1 year aboard the International Space Station through an extensive comparison with his identical twin, Mark Kelly, who remained on Earth. Kelly's newly genetic expression had in fact changed. But who was he now? Well, good news, he and Mark are still identical twins. Changes in gene expression are how the human body reacts to the environment around it. Kelly's transformation suggests long-term alterations related to at least 5 biological pathways and functions. Something's different. The preliminary results from this study on Kelly, now retired from NASA, were released in 2018's Workshop for NASA's Human Research. NASA published its first results, and the findings are a little nerve-wracking. To track physical changes caused by time and space, scientists measured Kelly's metabolites, cytokines, and proteins before, during, and after this mission. They learned that spaceflight is associated with oxygen deprivation stress, increased inflammation, and dramatic nutrient shifts that permanently affect gene expression and their makeup. The team focused on primarily chemical changes in RNA and DNA. 93% of Kelly's genetic expression stayed the same after re-entering our atmosphere. However, once he returned to Earth, several genes remained a little altered. Some of these, of course, are thought to be caused by the stresses of space travel itself, which is totally normal. Some, however, still have scientists scratching their heads. That's terrifying. And coming at the number 1 spot, Oumuamua. Oumuamua is the first interstellar object detected passing through the solar system. Formerly named 1-2017 U1, famously named Oumuamua, coming from the Hawaiian word scout, or roughly first distance traveler. As seen from the telescope at Haleakala Observatory in 2017 in Hawaii, discovered by Robert Wyrick using the Pan-STARRS telescope, it was about 33 million kilometers from Earth and heading away from the sun. And this is where it gets a little scary. The small object, only about a rugby field across and 10 rugby fields long, exhibited non-gravitational acceleration, turning away from the sun, potentially due to outgassing or a push from solar radiation. This thing came in fast, shot by us towards the sun, slowed down and then changed its course. This so-called tumbling, shiny red anomaly moving fast through space is likely of an extrasolar origin. Yeah, that means it came from somewhere else. Came from another solar system. Oumuamua's path cannot be captured into a solar orbit, so it would eventually have to leave our solar system and continue into interstellar space at some point, leaving us with millions of questions. But we were too late to catch it. Its whereabouts are now completely unknown. By 2019, some astronomers concluded that Oumuamua is most likely a natural object like comet or a rock. Of course, a small number of astronomers suggested that Oumuamua is a product of alien technology, and in January 2022, researchers introduced Project Lyra, which proposed that a spacecraft could be launched from Earth and might actually catch up to Oumuamua in 26 years for close-up studies. Being the first known object of its type, people have a lot of questions. Originally classified as a comet, then classified as an asteroid. Either case, we have an interstellar object, people, that seems to move, speed up, and turn on its own. So what's moving this thing? Radiation pressure, solar winds, or possibly an energy source made from some of our highly intelligent neighbors? Either or, this thing is absolutely terrifying, and if you're not familiar with the work of Professor Avi Loeb of Harvard, who is the leading expert on this anomaly, I highly recommend you check him out.